All right, folks. For week 7 Tuesday, we've got technically just a couple of things on the agenda here. First, make sure to take the vocabulary quiz. Code should be in your email. And then the other thing we'll be discussing has to do with narrative writing. So I've got a professional example of narrative writing for you first, nonfiction narrative writing. I've got a little clip, little YouTube video that I obviously won't be able to show you, but I'll ask you to view that on your own. And then I've got some other helpful documents and some other student examples and me example. And then I've got the assignment itself. So I'm going to start with the professional example. And I'm not sure why all of this annotating showed up, but I guess the copy that I found had been marked up and it shows up as links. I don't think it takes you to anything really special, just back to the original thing, but just ignore the weird blue things. So Am I Blue is a story by Alice Walker. And Alice Walker is a pretty famous African-American author. One of the things that she is most famous for is a rather controversial book that was made into a movie. And, well, we'll talk more about banned books later, but just remember her name. And whenever you see the book that she wrote, it's called The Colored Purple, on a banned books list, then we can talk more about it at that time. But anyways, title of this story, slightly less controversial, Am I Blue? So blue, of course, has kind of a secondary meaning aside from just being a color. The question, am I blue, is probably a fairly straightforward one if you're asking that. Blue is also, of course, associated with emotion. There are certain colors that we associate with feelings. And if you say, oh, man, I'm feeling so blue, then obviously you're feeling a little down, a little sad, a little upset. So in this story, it is given a third meaning, a third kind of pun. And as I read, I just want you to notice the ways that Alice Walker describes her surroundings and characters in a way that creates good imagery and description and characterization. For about 3 years, my companion and I rented a small house in the country which stood on the edge of a large meadow that appeared to run from the end of our deck straight into the mountains. The mountains, however, were quite far away, and between us and them there was, in fact, a town. It was one of the many pleasant aspects of the house that you never really were aware of this. It was a house of many windows, low, wide, nearly floor to ceiling in the living room, which faced the meadow, and it was from one of these that I first saw our closest neighbor, a large white horse, cropping grass, flipping its mane, and ambling about. Not over the entire meadow, which stretched well out of sight of the house, but over the 5 or so fenced-in acres that were next to the 20-odd that we had rented. I soon learned that the horse, whose name was Blue, belonged to a man who lived in another town, but was boarded by our neighbors next door. Occasionally, one of the children, usually a stocky teenager, but sometimes a much younger girl or boy, could be seen riding Blue. They would appear in the meadow, climb up on his back, ride furiously for 10 or 15 minutes, then get off, slap Blue on the flanks, and not be seen again for a month or more. There were many apple trees in our yard, and one by the fence that Blue could almost reach. We were soon in the habit of feeding him apples, which he relished, especially because by the middle of summer the meadow grasses, so green and succulent since January, had dried out from lack of rain, and Blue stumbled about munching the stalks half-heartedly. Sometimes he would stand very still just by the apple tree, and when one of us came out he would whinny, snort loudly, or stamp the ground. This meant, of course, I wanted an apple. It was quite wonderful to pick a few apples, or collect those that had fallen to the ground overnight, and patiently hold them, one by one, up to his large, toothy mouth. I remained as thrilled as a child by his flexible dark lips, huge cube-like teeth that crunched the apples, core and all, with such finality, and his high, broad-breasted enormity, beside which I felt small indeed. When I was a child, I used to ride horses and was especially friendly with one named Nan, until the day I was riding and my brother deliberately spooked her, and I was thrown, head first, against the trunk of a tree. When I came to, I was in bed, and my mother was bending worriedly over me. We silently agreed that perhaps horseback riding was not the safest sport for me. Since then, I have walked, and prefer walking to horseback riding, but I had forgotten the depth of feeling one could see in horses' eyes. I was therefore unprepared for the expression in Blue's. Blue was lonely. Blue was horribly lonely and bored. I was not shocked that this should be the case. 5 acres to tramp by yourself endlessly, even in the most beautiful of meadows, and his was, cannot provide many interesting events. And once rainy season turned to dry, that was about it. No, I was shocked that I had forgotten that human animals and non-human animals can communicate quite well. If we are brought up around animals as children, we take this for granted. By the time we are adults, we no longer remember. However, the animals have not changed. They are, in fact, completed creations, at least they seem to be, so much more than we, who are not likely to change. It is their nature to express themselves. What else are they going to express? And they do, and generally speaking, they are ignored. After giving Blue the apples, I would wander back to the house, aware that he was observing me. Were more apples not forthcoming then? Was that to be his sole entertainment for the day? My partner's small son had decided he wanted to learn how to piece a quilt. We worked in silence on our respective squares as I thought, well, about slavery, about white children who were raised by black people, who knew their first all-accepting love from a black woman, and then, when they were 12 or so, were told they must forget the deep levels of communication between themselves and Mammy that they knew. Later, they would be able to relate quite calmly. My old Mammy was sold to another family. My old Mammy was, fill in the blank. Many more years later, a white woman would say, I can't understand these Negroes, these blacks. What do they want? They're so different from us. And about the Indians, considered to be like animals by the settlers, a very benign euphemism for what they actually were, who did not understand their descriptions as a compliment. And about the thousands of American men who marry Japanese, Korean, Filipino, and other non-English speaking women, and of how happy they report they are, blissfully, until their brides learn to speak English, at which point the marriages tend to fall apart. What then did the men see when they looked into the eyes of the women they married before they could speak English? Apparently only their own reflections. I thought of society's impatience with the young. Why are they playing the music so loud? Perhaps the children have listened to much of the music of oppressed people their parents danced to before they were born, with its passionate but soft cries for acceptance and love, and they have wondered why their parents failed to hear. I do not know how long Blue had inhabited his 5 beautiful, boring acres before we moved into our house, a year after we had arrived, and had also traveled to other valleys, other cities. He was still there. But then, in our 2nd year at the house, something happened in Blue's life. One morning, looking out the window at the fog that lay like a ribbon over the meadow, I saw another horse, a brown one, at the other end of Blue's field. Blue appeared to be afraid of it, and for several days made no attempt to go near. We went away for a week. When we returned, Blue had decided to make friends, and the 2 horses ambled or galloped along together, and Blue did not come nearly as often to the fence underneath the apple tree. When he did, bringing his new friend with him, there was a different look in his eyes, a look of independence, of self-possession, and inalienable hoarseness. His friend eventually became pregnant. For months there was, it seemed to me, a mutual feeling between me and the horses of justice, of peace. I fed apples to them both. The look in Blue's eyes was one of unabashed, this is it-ness. It did not, however, last forever. One day, after visiting the city, I went out to give Blue some apples. He stood waiting, or so I thought, though not beneath the tree. When I shook the tree and jumped back from the shower of apples, he made no move. I carried some over to him. He managed to half-crunch one. The rest he let fall to the ground. I dreaded looking into his eyes, because I had of course noticed that Brown, his partner, had gone, but I did look. If I had been born into slavery, and my partner had been sold or killed, my eyes would have looked like that. The children next door explained that Blue's partner had been put with him, the same expression that people used I had noticed when speaking of an ancestor during slavery who had been impregnated by the owner, so that they could mate and she conceive. Since that was accomplished, she had been taken back by her owner, who lived somewhere else. Will she be back? I asked. They didn't know. Blue was like a crazed person. Blue was, to me, a crazed person. He galloped furiously, as if he were being ridden, around and around his beautiful 5 acres. He whinnied until he couldn't. He tore at the ground with his hooves. He butted himself against his single shade tree. He looked always toward the road down which his partner had gone. And then, occasionally, when he came up for apples, or I took apples to him, he looked at me. It was a look so piercing, so full of grief, a look so human, I almost laughed. I felt too sad to cry. To think there are people who do not know that animals suffer. People like me who have forgotten and daily forget all that animals try to tell us. Everything you do to us will happen to you. We are your teachers as you are ours. We are one lesson is essentially it, I think. There are those who never once have even considered animals' rights, those who have been taught that animals actually want to be used and abused by us, as small children love to be frightened or women love to be mutilated and raped. They are the great-grandchildren of those who honestly thought because someone taught them this, women can't think and can't faint. But most disturbing of all, in Blue's large brown eyes was a new look, more painful than the look of despair, the look of disgust with human beings, with life, the look of hatred. And it was odd what the look of hatred did. It gave him, for the first time, the look of a beast. And what that meant was that he had put up a barrier within to protect himself from further violence. All the apples in the world wouldn't change that fact. And so Blue remained, a beautiful part of our landscape, very peaceful to look at from the window, white against the grass. Once a friend came to visit and said, looking out on the soothing view, and it would have to be a white horse, the very image of freedom. And I thought, yes, the animals are forced to become for us merely images of what they once so beautifully expressed. And we are used to drinking milk from containers showing contented cows whose real lives we want to hear nothing about, eating eggs and drumsticks from happy hens, and munching hamburgers advertised by bulls of integrity who seem to command their fate. As we talked of freedom and justice one day for all, we sat down to steaks. I am eating misery, I thought, as I took the first bite and spit it out. All right. So Alice Walker is definitely making a point with this narrative and encouraging empathy and compassion towards animal, even to the point of, vegetarianism. But even if you don't agree with her message, I hope that you can see the really skillful ways that she's able to tell this story and create the mental imagery that goes along with this tale. So she gives us our setting. She gives us our character, Blue. She gives us an idea of Blue's life, the description of kind of what his general day was like, likes eating apples, likes riding around, but he doesn't get a lot of those, so he's bored. There's this section where she shows us, what it's like when he eats an apple, his flexible dark lips, huge cube-like teeth crunch the apple's core and all, his high, broad-breasted enormity. So lots and lots of nice adjectives and things to describe the details of Blue. Then we get this kind of little segue, this personal connection where Alice Walker talks to us about how animals, in some ways, have had similar struggles over their history as oppressed people have, as slaves, as Indians, as mail order brides, as young people. All of these groups, have something in common, are often misunderstood and mistreated throughout history. Then we get the climax, the main event. There is another horse, a second horsey. Woo! So when we see Blue with Brown, his partner, they're ambling, they're galloping, everything seems happy and seems good. The look in his eyes is different. But then we get the removal of his partner. And I think this section is just really good showing, rather than just saying Blue was upset or Blue was crazed, showing the pain and the grief that Blue's experiencing. Only half crunching one apple, doesn't even care about the apples anymore. The look in his eyes and that connection to oppressed peoples once again. The way that he kind of deals with his stress, galloping furiously, whinnying until he just can't whinny anymore, tearing at the ground, butting himself against the tree, looking down the road, as if to wonder, is she coming back? Is she coming back? And then the look. So the looks that Alice Walker describes are definitely, they evolve throughout the story. So that's definitely poignant narrative telling there. Okay, so that is kind of your professional example of narrative telling. Now, your narratives that you're going to write for me, they don't have to make a point or an argument in the same way that this one does, but I at least wanted you to see the bits of the narrative that did effectively show action. Okay, so this is the video. It's only a couple minutes long. It's just something to kind of visually emphasize how it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it is kind of the message behind this video. So I think it was originally meant as a commercial, so it's pretty short. So take a look, feel free to pause me, and then I'm going to talk to you about other good words. Okay, so I found this word wheel a few years ago, and I really liked the way that it was set up, the concentric circles, the colors, because I feel like your evolution, your journey through school is, working your way out on this word wheel here. So these words right here, this is like elementary school level stuff. We don't need any of this in your essays. If I see, I felt so sad, I'm just going to cringe and feel very badly about things. And then as you get older, maybe this is like the middle school circle. So we're getting better. There's some words that are not quite so blah. Optimistic, that's a nice one. Sure. Insecure, submissive. I mean, they're better than the inner circle. Still working on it though. So hopefully by this point you are fully in outer circle territory. And if you search around on the internet, you can definitely find many of these kind of word wheels, and they have different options for the outside, because emotions are complicated, complex things, and even if one of the words on this outer level isn't necessarily how you feel, find the one that fits closest and just search thesaurus for synonyms. And you're like, well, I don't know if I really felt inadequate, but then maybe you search for inadequate and you're like, that right there, that's the emotion that I actually felt. So try to stick to outer level words, and even go beyond that. I mean, even some of these outer level words are ones that you could probably know as a young person. I mean, empty, okay, well, that's good. It's descriptive. It's kind of metaphorical, but I'm sure a young person would know empty too. Loving, yeah, sure, okay. There's some good ones out here. Repugnant, detestable, aversion. There's some positive ones. Negative, positive. Anyways, so point being, word choice matters. How you say something matters. And let's talk about narrative. So this is really the only writing assignment you're going to have the entire year that is not persuasive or argumentative in its nature. This is the only assignment you'll have where you'll get to tell me a story. For some people, they love this one more than anything else because it's a little bit different and it's a little bit more personal. And for some people, maybe kind of therapeutic, the chance to be able to talk through a life experience that affected you deeply. can help you work through the thing. So the narrative that you write, I'm keeping it very, very general. Lots of choice here. Don't often get choice in the things you get to do for class. But you're going to be writing on a moment of emotional power. So when I say emotional power, what I mean is there better be a strong emotion associated with your memory. So if all that you felt during the memory was just like calm or neutral, is not good enough. So give me something that made you feel sad or happy. I know I'm using inner word wheel words right now, but or angry or embarrassed or disgusted or I don't know, whatever. So some sort of experience that you're going to be describing in detail with lots of imagery and figurative language. We've been reading Fahrenheit 451. You've been learning figurative language from the master himself, Ray Bradbury. So hopefully you know how to incorporate some of that in a descriptive way as well as in a persuasive way. So goal is at least 2 to 3 double-space typed pages. So this will be definitely on the longer side, and you will have much longer than 40 minutes in class to be able to work on this lovely essay here. I think I've given you a little while, more than a week for sure. But yeah, so anyways, MLA format is standard. Your name, teacher's name, class name, date the assignment is due. So for us, that would be 9 October 2020. Let's see, greeting areas. So since this is an essay, I'm going to do another grammar, punctuation, spelling assessment. So far, we've only had the baseline and the guide to grammar book. So here's an opportunity to show that in a fuller piece. Let's see, figurative language will be the level of emotion, description, and high quality that you bring to your memory. Obviously, you should definitely break out those, really descriptive $5 words. Don't make it a mess of them in there, but definitely try to be evocative in your description. And then varied syntax. Use complete sentences if you wanted to deviate from normal sentence structure for dramatic effect in some way. Then consult with me, make sure you're doing it right. But I've had some people who, maybe used dramatic fragment to make a point or something like that. But, it must be very clear to me as I read it that something like that would be intentional. Otherwise, just stick to complete sentences. Okay, so that's the assignment itself. So pretty open-ended, got a decent amount of time. Hopefully you already have, an idea brewing in your brain. If not, then obviously you'll have to go through a brainstorming period. But as you are brainstorming, I have these tips for narrative writing, and it just shows how to take telling and turn it into showing. So they give you a series of pieces of advice, and they give you a bad, better, best version. So this one focuses on someone who lost their dog. Their precious little doggy died. So first description, 2 sentences, straightforward. You told me what happened. You told me how you felt. That's it. That's all we got. Second version, much more descriptive. So all these little italicized phrases are detailed telling. Detailed telling is better than just telling, for sure. But it is not quite as good as showing. So in this version, we can see little Fido and his scruffy ears, and we can see his deterioration and the illness, and how he tried to caper and have a little fun in spite of it, and how weak that he got towards the end, and how the person forgot and she filled his water bowl all the way to the top, and then she remembered. Anyways, so much more emotional. We care much more about little Fido the doggy and this person who's lost him, much more in this version than in the others. So anyways, lots and lots of examples on there. So take a look at that if you would like some inspiration. Okay, so here I've got some past student examples. Oh, good grief. Some past student examples, if the school filter will let me get to them. Why it's triggering me right now. Ta-da! Okay, great. So these are from an English 3 class that I had. So they are not students who are at the class level that you guys are at. But I thought they still did a good job of tapping into emotion and adventure and, talking about their life experiences. So if you're thinking about writing a narrative that's a little bit more on the negative side, this first one is a negative emotional experience. So there's still some good quality narrative things in here. Even an occasional, $5 vocabulary word. So take a look at this if you would like some past student inspiration, kind of a dramatic negative event for this student involving his father. Last time he saw his father. And then this one is more on the positive side, kind of positive adventure duck hunting experience. So if that is something that appeals to you, then check this out and see how Jesse is able to describe these experiences in a way that, even for someone who has never kayaked through a river or hunted ducks, which would be me, I was able to kind of see, his shaking hands and camouflage and face paint, really, picture what was going on pretty vividly. So anyways, those two are there for you. You can flip through those. And then the last thing that I have for you, have my narrative. So this is back when I was still in this room. I wrote this when I was in graduate school. And my narrative length requirements were a bit more intense than yours. So it's kind of on the long side. So I'm definitely not going to read it out. And obviously, if you've been with me since the beginning of the year, you know what happened this year with my mom. And this narrative was about when I first found out that she was sick. So 18 years now, that since I found out that mom was sick. So it was, emotional discovering what was happening to her and what was going to happen. So I tried to describe that as best I could. And yeah, so that's my example. So since you are trying to write on a more college level, it may be a good idea to take a look at my example just as an example of kind of college level writing, because I did get an A, so it's at least decent, Okay, I think that's all that I have for you in terms of narrative stuff. So come on, Canvas, load please. Okay. So we've gone through most of this, except for the stuff that I kind of charged you to read on your own as necessary. So my plan for tomorrow is to make tomorrow just a working day because you do have a couple of things due tomorrow. The resume is due tomorrow if you haven't turned that in already. As well as the part 1 questions. So those last 2 part 1 questions can take a bit of time, and I think it would be good to allot some time for you guys to work on those things if you haven't been working very much on them already. And then any other time that you have, in the midst of juggling your other things, get a start on the narrative. So this will be kind of a free working day to put a little bit of work in on those 3 assignments. And I'll say that again in tomorrow's video just in case somebody wasn't listening to this one. So, all right, that's all for week 7 Tuesday.